All right, so let's take a quick look at what we did already. I'm going to go ahead and press play here. And you can see in our game view down here, we have an idle state. Our guy's sliding a little bit because of the ramp. I'm going to turn off gizmos here just so we can see our frog. The next thing we need to do is, and this might be a little bit longer of a video, but we're going to hook up the input system so that we can make our character walk. So make sure you have your animator open. If for whatever reason you don't, go to Window, Animation, and then click on Animator here, and that'll open that up. We can also go to Layout here, and we can go Save Layout here, or Save Layout to File. And then you could save this layout, and then every time we need our layout, it'll show up top here. So we have an idle here, and what I'd like to do is create an animation, just like before. So let's select our player here, and I'm going to go to idle, and I'm going to create a new clip, and I'm just going to call this one Walk. And let's go inside of Art here, and I think we save this inside of our Ninja Frog. Yeah, there's our idle animation. So I'm going to go ahead and save this one as Walk. And then under main characters here, you can see we have our Walk animation clip here. And then we have it doesn't look like we have an actual walk animation, but we'll just use the run. So I'm going to grab my run and just drop it on here. And it looks like it only grabbed the first one. So let's go ahead and just do what we did last time, where we expand this, and I'm going to grab all of these by holding left clicking on the first one, holding shift and clicking the last one, and just drag and drop it in there. And this one is roughly, let's see, 10 frames too. So I'm just scrolling my wheel in, or it's 11 frames. And so I'm going to go ahead and change this to 11. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my run here, and I'm going to change this pixels per unit down to, I forget if it was 20 or 25 that we did. So if we look at our idle here, when we go back to 1, we would see a difference in size. So here's frame 0. If I press play, you can see there's this run. And then if I change it, looks like a walk. If I change it to idle and I press play, yeah, it's the same size. And now we can also double check this by just selecting this in our scene and seeing that I set it to 20 there. I'm going to hit Control S to save my scene here. So inside of my animator, what I want to do is I'd like to take this walk animation and I'd like to connect it. Oh, it looks like it automatically added it when I did that. I'd like to connect the two here. So I'm going to need a parameter for this. So for example, if I'm on idle here and I press play, you'll notice that the entry point to this animator defaults to idle. And so automatically it starts playing, right? As my character's there. So inside of my animator, what I do is I want to right click and I want to make a transition to walk. And now when I press play, notice what happens in my view. You'll see that it automatically, and let's actually do this a little bit. I'm going to try to bring this up so you can see that. So you know what, to save time, I'm going to go ahead and grab my game view here and just dock it next to, or save space rather. I'm going to save it next to my scene view. And I'll just make sure to dock animation down here. Okay, now on my animator in game view, notice what happens when it goes from idle to walk. It'll go through my idle once, and then it'll automatically go down into my walk. So that's what's happening right now. That's why he looks like he's walking. Now what I can do is I can add a parameter here, and I'll just call this, I'll make it a Boolean, and I'll just call it walk. And I'll click on this arrow between my idle, and walk, and I'll open up my condition here, and I'll say if walk is set to true, which is this little Boolean here, then I want you to walk. So now when I press play, what's going to happen is if I have my player selected, you can see it's just looping through this idle. It never gets here. But once I check this on, you can see it goes to walk. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like that to be instantaneous. What that means, essentially, what I mean by that is when I click on this and I hit my WASD keys, I want it to immediately go to walk. I don't want it to play through my entire idle animation. So I'm going to uncheck this. I'm going to right click here and I'm going to make another transition here and I'm going to click back. And what I want to do on this is I want to make another condition, which is walk. And I want to say if walking is false, which means I'm not walking anymore, I released one of these keys, it's going to go back to idle. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control S to save this. And let's take a look inside of really our script and how we can set this up. So let's go ahead and select our player, and under our script machine, which remember, this is the kind of the brain that controls our visual script. I'm going to go ahead and hit edit graph. I'm going to open this up. And if you recall last time, we kind of fumbled a little bit through this, but whenever we press our WASD key, which is connected here, let me zoom in a little bit to our move action, we got this press WASD. And whenever we press spacebar, we got it to work where it pressed the spacebar key. So now I don't really need any of this junk, and I'm going to go ahead and delete it. Hit Control S to save that. All right, so what we're going to do is add a state machine component. And what that's going to do is handle the different states of essentially our player. You can imagine idling is a state, being hurt is a state, walking is a state. And so we'll use a state machine to control whether we're idling or walking, whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and add component here, and I'm going to start typing state. I'm going to add a state machine here. Then I'm going to go ahead and click new. And what we're going to do is in our assets folder, we're going to save off a new state machine. And we can go ahead and name this P state, and this will go for player state machine. You could type out the whole player state if you like. But you can see here, now we have this start, and it says on enter state, on exit state, and on update. All right, I'm going to go ahead and dock this. And just for the sake of clarity, a state machine essentially is you can think of it as a collection of states or a container of states. And one thing I like to do is if you double click the name of the state graph, it'll zoom in. If you double click it again, it'll unscreen. So that's another way of clicking the full screen button and not clicking the full screen button so that we can focus on our state graph. Now, this on enter state, on exit state, on update. Now, remember I mentioned that a state machine is a container. This is also a container. This is our starting container. So what I mean by that is if you double click it, you can see now we enter inside of this container, and we have an on update function, an on exit state function, and an on enter state function here. So let's test these out to see what happens on each state. So I'm going to drag this out, and I'm going to add another debug log, and it's going to be a message, and I'm going to drag this out and do another string. And inside of this string, we'll do string literal, and I'll just do OES, and that just represents on enter state. So this is going to run the second that our essentially, because our player's in our scene, it runs. So let's go ahead and do grab our console so we can take a look at this. And I'm going to make sure it's cleared out. Now when I press play, you should see OES appear right at the start of our game. So you can see OES, and that's starting at the beginning of our game. All right, so let's go ahead and close this out, and let's go back to our script graph here. And I'm going to click on player here to exit out. And instead of start here, I'm going to name this idle. And the reason for that is this is going to play my idle animation essentially when my game starts. And then what I'm going to do is I'd like to loop to a different state, which would be my animation walking or running state. All right, so let's right click and create a script state here. And then we can rename this, we can give this the title of walk. And then I can right click here and I can make a transition just like we did inside of our, inside of here when we went from idle to walk. All right, so this little guy here is our, essentially what controls the transition between these two. So if we double click it, it takes us into another graph. And what we can do is add a, add our input system here. And what I want to do is I want to register that movement like we did before. So here's on input system event, and we want to do vector 2 here. And if you recall, the input action that we want to do is our move action. And so we can actually wire this up. And what happens is when we're hitting the WASD key, it's going to set the transition, or it'll set the trigger, the state trigger transition here. And the input action we want is actually move, not look. And we're going to do this on hold. All right, so let's back up a little bit here. So you can now see that it changed to this lightning bolt symbol, which Unity uses to represent the essentially events happening. And I'm going to dock my console. Let's see, general console here. And I'm just going to dock this down here. And let's clear this out. Now when I press play, what you'll see happening is, let me zoom out a little bit here. I'm currently in my idle state. Do you see how this is blue? Now, if I click inside my game window and I press WASD, it actually went over to my walk state here. So it went from idle to walk. Perfect. So now we have this idle that's this transition set up. So when I press WASD, but it's actually not playing the actual animation to walk, and we're not moving our character yet. All right. So if you want to pause the video right now and see if you could figure out how to go the opposite direction, make a transition from here to here. And then once you make that transition, when you release the key, how does it trigger from walk to idle? So I'm going to right click on here. I'm going to go ahead, just pause the video, see if you can figure it out, but I'm going to go ahead and knock it out right now. So I'm going to click on make transition. I'm going to click back on this guy. And now you can see that it's this, it shows that this isn't set up because it's not giving us the event system. So if we double click inside of here, we can enter inside of here, and we can do the same thing we did before, where remember, we're looking for input, and then we're looking for system, and we're looking for a vector 2. But instead of on pressed, which is what we have now, we went on release. That means we're done pressing the WASD keys. And remember, the WASD keys are mapped to move. So now when we go back to player here, let's go ahead and just sort of give ourselves a little bit more room here. If I press play and I click on side of my game window here, if I push my W key, you can see it goes back to walk. Every time I release, it goes back to idle, which is really great. So that's pretty cool. I'm gonna make sure I save this, and I save my project. All right, so what we're trying to do is emulate essentially what we have in our animator here. We have any state here, or an entry state here, which we can make a transition here. And what we're saying is, hey, from any state, like say we have a shooting, a walking, running, jumping, if we release the key, we can go back to idle. And that's what this any state does. So what we could do inside of here is we can just right click and create an any state node. And then what we can do is, I think I could just grab this. Let's see, can I grab this thing here, or do I have to? Let's just go inside of here and copy this event here, which is on, we have our input action here, which says on release. So I'm just going to highlight this, hit Control C. I'm going to go back to my player here. And what I want to do is, oh, this is we're transitioning back to idle. Yeah, so this one is, let's see, we go inside of here, we have on release. So this is if we want to, when we release it from any state, we want it to go to our idle here. So I'm going to make a transition to idle here, and I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to, paste in this on release node, and I'm going to link it this way. So when we release our key on any state, and I'm going to hit Control S here, it should go back to our idle here. But when I push any key, I want it to go to walk. So with this one, I'm going to delete this. I'll just delete both. I'm going to make a transition here. And when I go to walk here, and double click this, I'm going to pause. And I want to do on pressed here. And I want to do move. And I'm just going to link this here. So whenever I press the key from any state, I want it to walk. That's the WASD keys. I want it to interrupt it. Because remember, we might be like walking and shooting or walking and throwing objects depending on the gameplay. So let's save this. And I'm going to double click this, and let's press play, make sure that these two states are working. So here's my any state. It looks like I'm idling, and I'm pushing my W, and you can see ASD, and it's going to there. And the 1 second I release it, it goes back over to idle. Good. So saving my project. All right, so let's do the same thing in our animator. We have this any state that goes to idle, and then we have a walk that goes to idle. And what I'd like to do is, let's see, I'd like to do the same thing we did here, where it's from any state. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to make a transition back to walk. This is kind of both of these. And then I'll break these transitions here. So what's happening is from any state, we're going to go to idle here. And let's see, from any state to walk, we definitely want this one. You can delete this entry point too. But here, we want to do what we did before. I'm going to click on this. So walk should be true here. And then we can do walk is false. Actually, I think we could just kind of leave that alone. You know what? Let's just make it explicit. So we're going to go ahead and to idle, we'll make sure walking is false. So we'll make sure that we're explicit there. Another thing is if I press play now, what we're going to notice, let's see, I select my player here, is it's looping back and forth inside of here. Do you see that going crazy? So what we want to do is on this transition here, we want to turn off in the settings here, can transition to self. And so now it'll just stay in the idle and sit there for a while. It won't keep going back to looking at any state. So you can see that now that line's not going crazy. All right, so let's go back here. Let's go inside of our idle and double click that. And what we're going to do is we're going to set it up so that when we enter the state, right, which it just does it right automatically, we're going to trigger the is walking to idle when we push the key. All right, so we know that we want to set this walk to false when we're going to idle. So I'm just going to drag this out and I'm going to start typing animator and then bool. And maybe animator set bool. Maybe I should spell animator right. There we go, set bool. And there's a name and a value here. So what's the name? Well, the name is walk with a capital W. Make sure to spell that right. And the value is unchecked. So let's save that and let's press play. And you can see it did go there, right? It's on the enter state. It set the animator to bool. So that's right off the bat. So let's uncheck play there. I'm going to actually copy this animator set bool state. I'm going to go back into my player here. And let's go inside a walk here. All right, and let's paste this inside of here. And then we're going to link this up and we're just going to turn on that value. And I'm going to hit Control S to save that. Let's go back out to player. And now let's press play. And now when I push my WASD keys, it plays that walk animation regardless of which WASD key I press, which is great. And you can see it's kind of going, it's updating down there as I push those keys. Actually, let's take another look at that. It looks like, here, let's see. I have on pressed. Oh, I need on hold. That's the reason for it. I had unpressed because I was wondering why it wasn't triggering this quickly. So let's go back here. Let's save this. No, I want it on hold. Did I mark it as on hold? Let's take a quick look. Let me just double check that. Yeah, on hold. Okay, good. Great. Yeah, now when I press anything, essentially it all goes back to walk. Great. And you can also check these, make sure that neither of them has exit time on so that it automatically switches between them. I think that's good for this video. We'll start working on actual player input movement in the later tutorials.